Здравейте на всички! Благодарим, че дойдохте днес. Аз ще кажа само няколко встъпителни слова на български, за което се извинявам на спикерите. I'm just excusing I'm talking in Bulgarian, not in English to our international speakers. Малко организационна информация. Събитието ще протече от 1 до 5:30. Имахме една кафе пауза, ще имаме още една кафе пауза от 3:15. Отзад може да си намерите кафенца и водички. Ако има нещо, може да се обръщате към мен да задавате въпроси. Имаме 4 спикъра. Welcome to Giles Sirett, who is from ShapeBlue and who will be our opening speaker. Освен него имаме още 3 спикъри. Мария Барта from Germany, from Intelligence Germany. Боян Круснов от екипа на StorPool и Мариан Маринов от SiteGround, който може би малко закъснява и ще дойде малко по-късно. So, Giles, it's your turn. Say hi to everybody.
Thank you very much, Yvette. Hi, everybody. As Yvette says, I'm Giles. Now, I could deliver this in Bulgarian, but I can't speak a single word of Bulgarian. I could maybe do a little bit of it in French, but it's going to have to be English, I'm afraid. So as Yvette says, I work and run a company called ShapeBlue. We're a company who focus on Apache CloudStack and related technologies. This group is, I'll explain the structure of it in a second, but it's a meetup group that's around Apache CloudStack. This isn't a ShapeBlue corporate thing. I just happen to be chairman of that user group as well. I work a lot in the CloudStack community. I'm a PMC member and committer in Apache CloudStack. Spend the rest of my time running a company, chair of this group, and do some other things in my spare time. Anybody interested in rugby here? No? Hasn't really developed in this country. All right. Okay. The aims of the group. So the CloudStack European user group has been around for about 7 years, and it's a group of IT professionals who work in cloud computing with the common denominator, the central thing that they're all interested in Apache CloudStack. And that's normally because they're running CloudStack in their organization, they're developing around CloudStack, or they're a user of a CloudStack environment. So we set the group up to be a sort of collaborative environment, anything to do with CloudStack, and that touches on storage, hence the relationship we have with StorPool, who have sponsoring and organizing this, hypervisors, other networking technologies, anything relating to infrastructure as a service. And what we normally do is meet quarterly. We meet all over Europe. It's the first time we've been to Sofia, but we meet in London, we meet in Paris, Germany, lots of different locations. We meet quarterly, drum up some speakers to tell us some interesting stuff, have a few drinks together, share a few experiences, and talk about technology. That's the idea of this group. There isn't really any sort of membership database for this group. There is a LinkedIn group called the CloudStack European User Group, and I generally just say to people, join that group, and then you'll know when there's another event going to happen, or something like that. Before we move on, just need to say massive thank you to Yvette and the rest of the guys at StorPool. In fact, let's give them a round of applause. They've done very well organizing this. I mean, the work that goes into just getting these facilities organized, getting a live stream organized, getting all the AV equipment is significant. So thank you very much for that. ShapeBlue, my company, also sponsors these events as well. In terms of today's agenda, I normally start just by doing a welcome, as I am now, and doing a recap of the news of what's going on around Apache CloudStack. Boyan is going to talk to us about ultimate performance, not just any performance, but ultimate performance with KVM. KVM is, in the CloudStack world, probably the most widely used hypervisor. We see a broad range of hypervisors being used, but it's certainly the hypervisor that we see the most uptake with. Very much looking forward to Boyan's talk. Maria has come all the way from Dresden in Germany to tell us a service manager's perspective of CloudStack. Another interesting sounding talk. CloudStack is an infrastructure as a service platform, and it requires running. It has often hundreds, thousands of users using it, and from the viewpoint of maintaining that service, there's often a lot of work needs to be done there. So I'm very interested to hear what Maria's got to say. We're then going to have coffee and some typical Bulgarian dishes. Don't know what a typical Bulgarian dish is, but I'm looking forward to that. Paul, my colleague, is here. He's going to be telling us what's coming, what's in development, what's in the pipeline, what's coming in new versions. Just give everybody an overview of the sort of functionality that's coming along. I guess, Paul, what you're talking, sort of 3-6 month time frame, or stuff that isn't there in CloudStack yet that you will see in a future release. And Marianne, I haven't met Marianne yet. Where is he? Not here. He's a little bit late. Good, he's on at the end anyway. Marianne is going to talk about... Yeah. Well, I mean, if he doesn't show up, it means we can always start drinking beer a little bit earlier, Yvette, right? He's already in the bar, don't worry. He's in the bar already. Good, that will be a good talk. He's talking about working on high-density networks, so again, another really interesting sounding talk. All right, just in terms of everybody who's here today, just to do a show of hands, who sort of put everybody into 3 categories. Who works regularly, runs a CloudStack environment, is sort of involved in CloudStack on a day-to-day basis? Okay, so that's probably about, I don't know, 10-20% of the room. Who has sort of downloaded, experienced CloudStack, got a little bit of experience with it, or you read about it? Yeah, into half the room. And I assume, therefore, the third category I'm going to say is who hasn't ever really seen CloudStack and has just turned up today because it sort of sounds a bit interesting. I'm guessing that's everybody else, right? Okay, good. So normally at these groups, people are normally in the first 2 categories. It's quite seldom that we have people who have just sort of come along to find out about CloudStack. But Maria did broaden the scope of this a little bit and call it a European Cloud Day. So rather than just diving in and telling you all the stuff that's been going on for 3 months, what I'm going to do now, just 15 minutes, is just give everybody a quick CloudStack 101. Just a few slides, just to give you an idea what it is, use cases, what its history is, etc., which hopefully should then put some of the other talks into more context for those people in the third group. So apologies to the people in the first 2 groups. You know all of this already, but do feel free to interject and shout out and tell me if I'm telling you something wrong or something like that. Okay, this group... the European user groups are one of many different CloudStack user groups. They're quite organic. They happen all over the world. They're generally, this is the sort of typical size they are. In fact, Maria's company are involved very much in the user group in Germany. There's a user group in Romania. There's lots in India, in the US. And these things are happening. These meetups are happening all the time. Generally, they have a similar sort of format, is people from lots of different environments, lots of different technology environments, but the common interest is Apache CloudStack. And we also, as a community, once or twice a year have a much bigger event, which we call the CloudStack Collaboration Conference. The last one of those happened in April down in Brazil. And the next one, if anybody is interested in coming along, is in a very interesting place, which is in Las Vegas. So if anybody fancies coming and hearing lots of information about cloud, I mean, it's much bigger than this. There's 2 whole tracks of talks for 2 days and a day-long hackathon on the technology at the end, and then lots of fun to be had in Las Vegas. That conference has its own website, cloudstackcolab.org. I'll share these slides at the end if anybody wants a link to that. In terms of, particularly for those of you who are new, how this group relates to those other things, at the heart of everything we do with Apache CloudStack is the Apache Software Foundation. So that's the organization that governs Cassandra, it governs CloudStack, it governs Hadoop. Okay, it's an open source foundation. Okay, the actual development of CloudStack goes on in a specific community, which is governed by the Apache Software Foundation. And this is run predominantly on mailing lists, and this is where the actual development work of CloudStack goes on. These user groups, like we're doing today and the other ones I showed you, are sort of informal things around the edge. So there's nothing, this isn't a formal meeting of the CloudStack community, this is just a group around the edge. And then the conference I was talking about then, that's a slightly more formal thing that happens once or twice a year. Okay, so CloudStack 101. This won't take long. So Apache CloudStack, I'm going to actually read this, is a scalable, multi-tenant, open source, purpose-built cloud orchestration platform for delivering turnkey infrastructure as a service clouds. Okay? So CloudStack, lets us build an IaaS, an infrastructure as a service environment on our infrastructure, and orchestrates all of the underlying components, the hypervisors, the storage, the network, the compute, to allow that to be presented as an API, as a UI, as a CLI, and abstracted from whoever's actually using it. Other key words there, multi-tenant. CloudStack is heavily multi-tenanted, so we have complete isolation of the people using it, which means it's commonly used in public cloud environments as well. It's open source, it's developed by us in the Apache community, and another key point, I mean, turnkey is a bit of an old-fashioned name, but CloudStack is a relatively simple, installable IaaS platform. It is not a massive toolkit to change the world in relation to infrastructure. If you want to do IaaS, whether that's private cloud within an organization or to produce a public cloud offering, CloudStack is a relatively simple thing to install, get some infrastructure under it, and get it running. Okay, so we use the term turnkey. In terms of infrastructure as a service, I mean, this diagram, I think I first saw this diagram when Amazon first came out with EC2, which was, honestly can't remember when that was.
2004?
Thank you, 2004.
2004, it was the S3, 2006.
2006, so this was probably 2007. I saw literally this diagram, which was somebody explaining to me how they had built their EC2, somebody at Amazon, how they built their EC2 platform. They had taken a load of networking storage compute, stuck a hypervisor on top, then they had a forked version of Zen they were using. They had what they called their CMP, their cloud management platform, their orchestration layer, which sat on top of it. That presented an API, put an e-commerce platform on top to actually charge people for this, and that was basically the building blocks of EC2. So CloudStack was envisioned as a way of other organizations being able to do the same thing. So obviously, they need some networking, storage, compute. What CloudStack lets us do is choose any, pretty much, hypervisor. CloudStack, one of its key features is it's hypervisor agnostic, okay? So it supports KVM, supports VMware, Zen, HyperV, OVM, the new flavor of Zen, which is XCP-NG, which is a fork. And as new hypervisors are developed, the developers at CloudStack will continue to build that orchestration into those hypervisors. CloudStack is that orchestration layer. It presents a REST API, so it abstracts all of that stuff below it. And then what people put on top is depending on what their use case is and what they're trying to do with it. We've got a CLI that comes with CloudStack called Cloud Monkey, and if you're doing public cloud, you might still put an e-commerce platform on top. Increasingly, we're seeing people who are using it to deliver a container as a service offering, management tools they might bolt on top, platform services. Oh, sorry, gone too far. Developer tooling. Often CloudStack underpins a CI/CD pipeline. So people don't just want containers or just a virtual machine instance to run stuff in their CI/CD pipeline. What they might need is a very complex infrastructure topology with a complex network topology in between it to run things against, okay? And CloudStack, with its networking model, which I'll talk about more in a second, allows people to do that all through its REST API. So highlights broad and deep hypervisor support. Its networking model is, I think, superb. It has a very, very advanced virtual networking model, which is the thing that sort of differentiates CloudStack from a lot of the other things that are around. Its architecture is highly scalable. The largest known production cloud got up to 35,000. It's actually got a bit smaller now, but got up to 35,000 physical hosts orchestrated by CloudStack. It has high availability functionality, has a range of interfaces. I'm just giving you a sort of feel of the sort of functionality we get here. Also has a plugin model, so we get a lot of plugins. We have a Kubernetes plugin, we call it CloudStack Container Service. StorPool have a plugin. Other vendors have plugins where they allow CloudStack to orchestrate their technology as part of its core offering. That's what the UI looks like. Oop. There you go, there's a pretty UI. I won't get into doing a demo today. There's a couple of examples of API calls. So everything we do in the UI, you can do via the API. And you'll normally see these things embedded in people's CI/CD scripts. You'll see this put into Ansible playbooks and that sort of thing, where you're actually creating bits of infrastructure to run a series of tests and then pulling down that infrastructure afterwards. And we have a CLI tool called CloudMonkey, which lets you access the API via a CLI. Just very briefly, I won't go through the full details of this, the history of CloudStack. CloudStack was built as a EC2 alternative back in those days of sort of 2007, 2008 by a Bay Area startup who became Cloud.com. They're originally called VMOps. They then sold the technology to Citrix. Citrix didn't know what to do with it. They got all a bit confused. So Citrix ended up open sourcing it and giving it to the Apache Software Foundation. And that's when people like us started to get involved. And since 2013, it's been an ASF project. Citrix are no longer involved in the project, and the developer community is from all sorts of different organizations, vendors, integrators, users, customers, that sort of thing. Today, we do 3 or 4 releases a year. It's in widespread use across 2 different use cases, either public cloud or private cloud. We have a LTS release cycle as well for people who want some more stability. And the user community is, as I say, is heavily user-driven. So people who are using CloudStack and working with it tend to contribute in. What we don't have in CloudStack is big software vendors trying to do their thing through that open source community. That's what Citrix tried to do, and it didn't really work when they were involved. Roughly 200 committers. The project management committee is made up of all sorts of different people. I'm actually on that committee. Just to give you an idea, this was last 4 weeks, 400 mailing messages going on the mailing list from 60 different people, 30 merged PRs from 13 different authors, and 1,600 package downloads. That's people downloading CloudStack. Just to give you an idea, just sort of quick show of hands. Does that surprise, who is surprised that we've got that sort of activity in CloudStack? I always am if I didn't, or nobody want to put their hand up. Because it's not a project that's talked about very much, okay? And I'll explain why that is in a second, but it's a very vibrant and active open source community. A lot of people using it, a lot of people developing on it. Use cases, as I say, private cloud, public cloud, tends to be different sorts of organizations. So these are organizations, public cloud, typically service providers who are running a public IaaS offering. On the private cloud side, it's typically, there isn't a typical one, it's any organization who wants to do some infrastructure orchestration and have something underpinning other automation. Okay, actually, I'm just going to skip this one. Okay, so we do have a perception problem with Apache CloudStack. It's not a project that's generally talked about very much, even though everybody here, nobody put their hand up and said they were surprised. Bearing in mind who uses it, the number of people who are using it, how much development's going on, it's not talked about very much. And that's a quote, goes back a few years. This was an architect at a broadcasting company in the UK, and that company had asked us, our company, to come in and talk to them about CloudStack. And this guy, the architect, sat there and said, CloudStack, I've never heard of that. Anyway, they now run a very large CloudStack environment, and it's been very, very successful for them. But the key point, and that guy in particular loved the technology when he got to see it, but CloudStack has a bit of a perception issue. Not a lot of people talk about Apache CloudStack. And the reason for that, well, there's a number of factors, but if we go back in 2011 on the Gartner hype curve, everything was about cloud computing and IaaS and infrastructure as a service. It was the hot thing, right? You roll forward 2017, we're sort of down here somewhere, okay? Cloud IaaS, infrastructure orchestration, isn't sexy, it isn't exciting, it's not what the marketing men are getting excited about anymore, okay? Everybody wants to nowadays align with Kubernetes, and every vendor under the sun wants to tell you how they've got amazing K8s integration, et cetera, et cetera. And that's great for us in CloudStack, because we actually don't care that much, we just carry on doing our stuff, and what we don't get is lots of vendors coming in all the time and trying to take the project in different directions. But what we also don't get is a lot of hype. Right? Which means it's a project that's not talked about very much. And the other problem was, we have an expression in the UK which is wrong place at the wrong time. And Bobby tells me my translation is correct. Does that? Well, I can't even pronounce that. I can't even read it, let alone pronounce it. So there's that lady in the wrong place at the wrong time. And when I say wrong place at the wrong time, as CloudStack was really taking off as a concept, 2011, 2012, there was another large open source platform which decided to be all about infrastructure as a service. Anybody guess what that was? Openstack, which is the mirror image of CloudStack, right? Openstack, which some amazing work gone in over the years with Openstack, but is the mirror image in terms of the ambitions of Openstack were here, right? The ambitions of CloudStack were only ever there, was to give a platform for service providers and enterprises who want to do simple IaaS. Openstack was about reinventing the way people did infrastructure, and then scratch below the surface, it was about a lot of vendors wanted to attack VMware and wanted to, we all know all of that. And it had this massive scope, and of course, that created hype. And that created every vendor wanting to get involved in OpenStack. I'm not criticizing OpenStack technology, and I never will. There's some great works gone on there over the years. But it did mean when you're a similar project doing similar things, first of all of the analysts wanted to compare the two and say, hey, we've got a race between these things. And we were there going, it's a different thing. We're not trying to reinvent the world. We're just trying to do a relatively simple IaaS platform. We don't want these comparisons. We don't want to be that thing. But that continued, and what it did is it sucked a lot of the attention away from CloudStack, okay? So historically, that's another thing that's hampered the project. In terms of adoption, though, we don't get talked about much. That's the bit of the iceberg. But if you look below the surface, there are so many people using this technology. This is a relatively old slide now. I can't keep up with it. And one of the things we don't do very well as an Apache project is track who's using the technology. It's a bit of a nightmare, but there are also a lot of service providers in here, a lot of large universities, a lot of telcos. The world's largest company uses CloudStack. You know, their name isn't here, but because they don't want their name to be here, but a lot of large organizations in production use with Apache CloudStack. And lots of logos, and then we've got all these people who we sort of hear about and we know are using CloudStack, but don't want to come out and publicly talk about it, can't be bothered to sort of get involved in the community. That's fair enough. I mean, open source software is there to take if that's what you want to do, okay? It is surprising how many people use CloudStack. There's 3 numbers. In fact, I won't play a guessing game, I'll just tell you what they are. So our known user list on cloudstack.apache.org, this is the list of people we know use it, is only 219 companies, right? And that's because we don't do any marketing at Apache. Yeah, we've got nobody to sort of engage and find these people and get their logos and do all of that sort of stuff. And there's a survey and people complete it and say, yes, I'm happy to have my name on the list. A lot complete it and don't say they're happy. And out of that, over the last few years, we've got 219 people. But then this is where the imbalance starts to show itself of the iceberg. In 12 months, we get 116,000 downloads of our management server packages. Right? That's basically downloading CloudStack. Okay. Sorry, that actually. Thank you, Andrea. Yeah, 21,000 unique IPs. Okay. There are a lot of organizations. I actually, through commercial stuff, we have customers who are running CloudStack, and some of these people who I can't talk about because they don't want me to, who you would fall over if you knew these organizations were running CloudStack. So widespread production use. Okay, and just a little bit more about why we have that perception problem. Does anybody here contribute to any other Apache projects? Or has anybody got any experience with working in an Apache project? I know you have. I know. Is that nobody? Okay. The Apache Software Foundation, its governance model is designed to not allow corporations and companies to take over projects. So everybody contributes to Apache as an individual. I contribute to Apache CloudStack as Giles, not as ShapeBlue. Okay? So there's no role for vendors or companies in Apache. Okay? The mission of the ASF is to give away software for, forget the words, public good. Thank you, Paul. Give away software. That's the mission, okay? And to not let companies interfere with how that works. Now, that model has been hugely successful for decades, 20 years now, okay? By not allowing companies to drag projects in different directions, you get this more organic software which lasts longer, has a broader range of use cases, etc. Okay? The problem is the Apache Software Foundation isn't very good and realistic around the need to market and the need to tell people that people are using the software. Okay? It's not really a commercially minded foundation for those reasons. The mission is just to give away software. Now you compare that to another foundation. This is the Openstack Foundation. I've just highlighted 3 words: promoting, ubiquitous, grow the ecosystem. That's the mission of that foundation. It's designed to take their technology out to the broader world. Okay? So this just explains why with something like CloudStack and a lot of other Apache technologies, these things are in such widespread usage, but you don't really ever hear a lot about them unless you come along to a meetup like this. Okay, I'll just flick through to that. So in summary, we've got an integrated end-to-end IaaS product. It's not a huge toolkit. It's a thing you install to do IaaS. Scalable, in adoption all over the place, fast to implement, multi-tenanted. The user community the developer community is led by people who are using it, not by vendors, okay? And a relatively narrow scope. CloudStack does what it does. We make it easy to integrate with for other things. We're not trying to, the expression we use in the UK, we're not trying to boil the ocean. We're not trying to change the world with CloudStack. And the hashtag, I haven't got one on, Paul's got one on. You'll see sometimes talked about CloudStack works. It just works. Out of the box, it's relatively simple. So that is CloudStack. If any of you are interested, those of you who haven't ever done anything, just try downloading it. Pop into the community, go into one of the mailing lists, say hello. If you're interested, you can get help there quite easily. People are always keen to help. If any of you are running CloudStack in your organizations, it's always great if you can get on that known user list, see if we can get beyond 219. If we could get to 16,000, it would be great, but yeah, 250 would do. Offer to do a case study with the project, always useful. And if you fancy going and talking about CloudStack at these sort of meetings, everybody here who's come to talk is spending their own time doing it. There's always lots of these sort of events on, so sticking a talk in around CloudStack at FOSDEM or LinuxCon or anything like that is always great if anybody's able to do that. Okay, that's my introduction and 101. So, next up is Boyan. That was from your Facebook profile.
Your Facebook profile.
Or was it your Twitter profile? I can't remember. Okay, thank you.